What if after Marineford, Luffy trained under Shanks instead of Rayleigh? How much stronger would he become learning directly from a Yonko? And would his return after 2 years make much of a difference? Events initially unfold the same way as Law rescues Luffy from Marineford and brings him to Amazon Lily. However, the major difference is that Shanks never encountered Buggy at Marineford, so the Straw Hat was never returned to Luffy. After the dust settled and Whitebeard and Ace were laid to rest, Shanks decided to personally return the Straw Hat to Luffy himself, choosing to ignore their promise just this once. After Luffy awakens in a violent rampage and Jinbei manages to calm him down, those who cared for Luffy begin to arrive, including Shanks and the red-haired pirates. After personally returning the Straw Hat, Shanks asks Luffy about his plans moving forward. Luffy explains his intention to reunite with his crew at Sabaody after 3 days, but Rayleigh points out the harsh reality that the Straw Hat pirates would never survive the New World without drastic changes. Shanks reinforces this by reminding Luffy of the monsters he encountered during the war, explaining that fighters on that level are scattered throughout the New World. Luffy finally accepts what everyone is telling him, and Shanks offers to help Luffy grow stronger himself, beating Rayleigh to the punch. With Rayleigh and Jinbei's help, Luffy returns to Marineford to perform his ritual honoring Ace's death and sends a message to his crewmates about reuniting after 2 years. After boarding the Red Force, Luffy sails toward Rusakaina. Unlike the original timeline, Luffy only stays on the island for 1 year instead of 2. During that first year, much like his training with Rayleigh, Luffy learns the fundamentals of all 3 forms of haki. But Shanks does not stop at the basics. He explains that a person's haki is only as strong as their willpower, and that with enough resolve, haki can be used in ways that only a handful of elite individuals are capable of achieving. Shanks demonstrates the advanced levels of each form of haki himself, showing Luffy exactly what he means. After witnessing Shanks' overwhelming power, Luffy commits himself fully to learning haki with one major restriction. Shanks warns him not to rely too heavily on his devil fruit. Without the ability to fall back on his devil fruit, Luffy's progress in learning haki skyrockets. During the day, he trains against monstrous creatures, and at night, he spars with Shanks, forcing himself to apply everything he learned in real time. This constant shift causes Luffy's adaptability in combat to grow explosively. Through sparring with an emperor, Luffy begins to notice subtle variations in Shanks' haki and experiences advanced armament and observation haki firsthand. Unlike the original timeline where Luffy only learns these techniques through fighting Katakuri and training with Hyogoro, in this alternate timeline he masters them completely during his training with Shanks. However, Shanks deliberately chooses not to teach Luffy advanced Conqueror's haki, noticing that Luffy's potential is so extraordinary that his Conqueror's haki already rivals his own. Teaching him advanced Conquerors would make Luffy an immediate threat to the world government and other emperors, placing an enormous target on his and his crew's backs. After 1 year on Rusakaina, Shanks and Luffy head to Little Garden where the legendary giants Dory and Brogy reside. After hearing about what Luffy went through during the Paramount War, Dory and Brogy decide to put their duel on hold to help him grow stronger. For another full year, Luffy fights these legendary warriors who do not hold back, unlike Shanks, who always held back during sparring. While Dory and Brogy may not be on the level of an emperor, they are stronger than many opponents Luffy would later face, and fighting them allows Luffy to surpass his physical limits with their combined combat experience of over 100 years. By the end of training, the two giants can hardly believe such a small man is capable of wielding such overwhelming power. After completing his training, Luffy and Shanks return to Amazon Lily, where they are welcomed by Rayleigh and Boa Hancock. Shanks cannot escort Luffy to Sabaody, as an emperor's ship would cause chaos. So with the help of the Kuja pirates and Boa Hancock, Luffy reaches Sabaody without complications. Much like in the original storyline, he confronts and effortlessly one-shots a pacifista, marking his return and sending a clear message to the world. The Straw Hat pirates immediately realize how much Luffy's power has grown during the 2 years apart, yet his carefree nature and bubbly personality remain unchanged. After their long-awaited reunion, the Straw Hats set sail once again, ready to face whatever adventure lies ahead. 10,000 meters beneath the ocean's surface, the Straw Hat pirates arrive at Fishman Island. Most events unfold the same way as Hody Jones successfully carries out his plan to rebel against King Neptune and captures the royal family. However, the major shift occurs when Luffy confronts Hody. After training with Dory, Brogy, and Shanks, Luffy's mindset has fundamentally changed. If a fight can be ended before any blood is spilled, it should be ended as efficiently as possible. Without hesitation, Luffy releases an overwhelming wave of Conqueror's haki across Joncord Plaza, instantly knocking every single new Fishman pirate. But in this alternate timeline, using his advanced observation haki, Luffy quickly identifies the trick behind Caesar's ability and immediately adapts his approach, making the fight significantly easier and far more one-sided in his favor. When the crew arrives in Dressrosa, Luffy learns that the Flame Fruit is the grand prize of the Kurita Coliseum tournament and becomes completely determined to win, viewing it as his way of honoring Ace's memory. Most events still unfold similarly as Luffy dominates his matches in the Coliseum, encounters Rebecca and Bellamy, and goes through many of the same situations. The major difference lies in his fight against Don Chinjao. Unlike before, the challenge of overcoming Chinjao's devastating headbutt does not trouble Luffy nearly as much because by now, Luffy has surpassed surpassed his former self by an overwhelming margin. Moving past the events of the Kurita Coliseum, the story shifts toward Luffy's confrontation with Doflamingo, and this is where things truly begin to change. In this battle, Luffy overwhelms Doflamingo with relative ease. During his training with Dory and Brogy, Luffy's gear force was drastically amplified, as his endurance had been pushed to its absolute limit. When this is combined with his mastery of advanced armament and observation haki, it gives Luffy a decisive edge over Doflamingo. His offensive and defensive capabilities far exceed anything Doflamingo anticipated. In every exchange, Luffy leaves Doflamingo completely dumbfounded as he continues to dominate the tyrant. No matter what strategy Doflamingo attempts to use, Luffy effortlessly avoids his attacks and counters without hesitation. Even worse for Doflamingo, Luffy relentlessly pelts him with strikes that deal internal damage, forcing him into a constant retreat. In the end, Luffy stands over Doflamingo not bruised, battered, or exhausted, but standing tall and victorious, having secured a decisive triumph. Moving forward from Luffy's overwhelming victory against Doflamingo, the crew's journey is suddenly thrown into chaos when Sanji leaves in order to protect his friends, having been blackmailed by both the Germa family and Big Mom. During this arc, Luffy encounters several opponents who are capable of standing their ground against him. However, many of these fights play out very differently compared to the original storyline. One of the most notable changes occurs during his battle against Charlotte Cracker. In the original story, Luffy struggled immensely to break through Cracker's defenses, especially due to the extreme durability of the Biscuit soldiers. But in this alternate timeline, Luffy's mastery of advanced armament haki allows him to bypass that durability entirely. As a result, he tears through the Biscuit soldiers with far less difficulty, making it much easier for him to reach Cracker directly and deliver a crushing blow that completely shatters his opponent's confidence and pride. Another major change in this timeline comes from Luffy's brief encounters with Big Mom herself. If you remember, during the Whole Cake Island arc in the original story, Luffy clashes with Big Mom on several occasions, only to be effortlessly swatted away each time, reinforcing the harsh reality that he was nowhere near strong enough to face her head-on. But in this version of events, things unfold very differently. Using advanced armament haki and its durability negating properties, Luffy is actually able to inflict damage on Big Mom. For the first time in many years, Big Mom is made to feel pain, a moment that sends shockwaves through everyone who witnesses it. Finally, the fight that undergoes the most dramatic transformation in this arc, and arguably becomes the best battle in the story, is Luffy's confrontation with Katakuri. In this version of the fight, Luffy is not caught off guard by Katakuri's advanced observation haki. Instead, the opposite happens. Luffy blindsides Katakuri by predicting his movements faster than Katakuri can predict Luffy's. This completely shifts the dynamic of the battle, as Luffy no longer spends most of the fight running away to buy time. Instead, he goes head-to-head with Katakuri, clashing with him at every turn. Now, this does not mean that Luffy is able to overpower Katakuri with ease. Rather, Luffy is only able to gradually pull ahead because of the intense training he underwent with Dory, Brogy, and Shanks. At the same time, the fact that Katakuri can also see seconds into the future keeps the fight feeling evenly matched. That is, until Luffy recalls a moment from his training with Shanks back on Rusakena. He remembers noticing that during their sparring sessions, Shanks was somehow able to disrupt his advanced observation haki, causing Luffy to miss his predictions despite seeing Shanks' movements perfectly. In those moments, Luffy could feel Shanks' Conqueror's haki radiating throughout the battlefield, overwhelming everything around them. This realization gives Luffy a bold idea during his fight against Katakuri. Upon entering his Snakeman form, Luffy blitzes Katakuri, attempting to overwhelm his observation haki with sheer speed, only to realize that speed alone is not enough to bypass future sight. That is when Luffy decides to copy what Shanks once did. Whenever Luffy goes on the offensive, he carefully times his attacks alongside bursts of Conqueror's haki. Sure enough, Luffy lands a devastating blow on Katakuri, leaving the strongest Sweet Commander completely dumbfounded. However, the fight does not end there. Luffy quickly realizes that this technique is extremely taxing, as it requires him to use all three types of haki at once. Because of that, he chooses to hold this move back, keeping it in reserve until he can execute it flawlessly. On the other hand, Katakuri is left confused by what just happened. That single strike was so unfamiliar that it rattled his senses, causing him to overthink Luffy's movements. As a result, Katakuri begins hesitating, sometimes failing to dodge properly as he anticipates another attack that never comes. It is as if the tables have completely turned. Even so, it is still not enough for Luffy to secure victory without bloodshed. One of the biggest obstacles remains Katakuri's mastery of his Devil Fruit. Although Luffy has figured out how to bypass future sight, he waits patiently for the right moment, knowing that using the technique recklessly could end disastrously if Katakuri were to figure it out. And then, as their final clash approaches, that moment finally arrives. In the blink of an eye, Luffy releases his Conqueror's haki, shattering the mirrors of the mirror world and landing the final blow, while Katakuri barely grazes him after misjudging Luffy's position. This time, Luffy achieves absolute victory, not a win born of chance. Even after taking Luffy's attack head-on, Katakuri still had the strength left to fight. He chose to accept defeat out of respect for Luffy, having recognized the young pirate's unbreakable will and unwavering conviction. After the events of Whole Cake Island, the Straw Hats successfully escape Big Mom's Vietnam's territory, rescue the Germa family, and retrieve Sanji. With that behind them, it is finally time to head straight to Wano, where the crew will face their greatest challenge yet. For the most part, the events that occurred in the original series also unfold in this alternate timeline. The Straw Hats arrive in Wano separately, blend in to gather information, and carefully move behind the scenes. However, the moment when Luffy witnesses his crew being blown to bits by Kaido changes dramatically. After Kaido destroys the mountain where Nami and the others were hiding, Luffy loses his composure and charges in to confront him. This marks their first encounter. In the original story, Luffy gives it everything he has, knocks Kaido down from the sky, but ultimately fails to deal any real damage, merely sobering Kaido up before being one-shotted moments later. In this alternate timeline, however, when Luffy knocks Kaido down from the sky, Kaido actually feels the impact. It does more than just sober him up. For the first time in a very long while, Kaido is knocked flat onto the ground. Realizing what just happened, Kaido is genuinely shocked that someone was strong enough to bring him down. After gathering his thoughts, Kaido slowly stands up and locks eyes with Luffy, who is visibly furious. Kaido smirks, clearly astonished by Luffy's strength. Luffy wastes no time and immediately launches another attack. This time, Kaido braces himself, believing the first blow was nothing more than a fluke. But to his surprise, the second strike hurts him just as much as the first. Realizing it was no coincidence, Kaido blocks the next attack and counters with his own. Luffy narrowly avoids it, finally grasping just how monstrous Kaido truly is. Their encounter is short-lived, as Kaido eventually lands a devastating blow that completely decommissions Luffy. When Luffy regains consciousness, he finds himself imprisoned in the Udon prisoner mine, where he encounters Kid and Hyogoro. Inside Udon, Luffy could have escaped at any time, as the explosive collars posed no real threat to him. However, after facing Kaido and experiencing his power firsthand, Luffy chooses to stay, hoping to further increase his abilities. During his time there, Luffy takes part in the sumo competition organized by Queen. In the original storyline, this is where Luffy learns advanced armament haki, or Ryuo, which becomes a crucial power-up for his eventual rematch with Kaido. In this alternate timeline, however, Luffy remains in Udon to train a newly uncovered ability instead: his capacity to disrupt an opponent's observation haki through the use of Conqueror's haki. During his stay in Udon, Luffy is able to gain a solid grasp of the new technique he uncovered while also refining his advanced armament and observation haki. Participating in the sumo competition allows Luffy to sharpen all three abilities that he will desperately need in his upcoming fight against Kaido. After subjugating the prison and freeing the prisoners, Luffy remains in Udon for a few more days. During this time, he continues refining his skills until activating his abilities becomes as natural as breathing. His rapid growth is something that impresses not only the samurai, but even his own crewmates. Once he perfects his skills, Luffy decides that it is finally time for another rematch, and with that decision, the invasion of Onigashima begins. After reaching the rooftop, Luffy, Kid, Law, Zoro, and Killer waste no time and immediately go all out against the two Emperors of the Sea. Luffy takes the lead and charges Kaido head-on, landing a powerful blow that sends the beast crashing to the ground. This time, however, it takes Kaido noticeably longer to stand back up. He did not expect Luffy to grow so much in the short amount of time he spent in prison. Even Big Mom is caught off guard, surprised to see Kaido get knocked down so decisively with a single punch. Granted, Kaido intentionally takes the hit in order to gauge Luffy's strength. Throughout the battle, Luffy relentlessly pummels Kaido while the others provide support and keep Big Mom occupied. Each of Luffy's attacks reverberates through Kaido's body, dealing damage that steadily accumulates over time. Kaido, however, is not filled with fear, but with excitement. For the first time in years, he is facing someone from the new generation who is capable of making him feel pain. Done with testing Luffy, Kaido finally steps forward and unleashes a devastating attack that tears through the rooftop of Onigashima. Luffy fights with everything he has, trading blow after blow in an attempt to overcome Kaido's overwhelming power. Yet despite all of his training, the fact that Kaido can withstand his attacks even while Luffy is using every one of his new abilities makes him realize that Kaido is a wall he cannot simply break through. More importantly, as Luffy both receives Kaido's attacks and lands his own, he begins to sense that something is off, though he cannot immediately identify what it is. The only time he has felt this kind of power before was when Shanks demonstrated the advanced forms of haki he once planned to teach him. Holding on, Luffy continues to observe Kaido's movements and attacks. Eventually, he realizes the truth. Kaido is coding himself in Conqueror's haki, drastically amplifying the power and devastation of his blows. But by the time Luffy reaches this realization, Kaido has already landed an attack that nearly puts him in a coffin. Thankfully, Yamato intervenes, buying Luffy enough time to recover. After regaining his strength, Luffy returns to the rooftop for round 2 with Kaido. This time, Luffy blocks Kaido's attack, proving he has fully grasped how to code himself in Conqueror's haki. CP0 interferes in their fight, causing Luffy to suffer a fatal blow. Kaido leaves the rooftop to announce Luffy's death, but on the edge of death, Luffy awakens his devil fruit. He rises as if nothing happened, and round 3 begins, marking the final stage of their battle. Luffy overcomes Kaido's immense durability by combining the power of his awakened devil fruit with his overwhelming haki, slowly dominating him. In the end, Luffy brings Kaido down for good, with the awakening of his devil fruit becoming the final nail in the coffin. The fall of two emperors sends shockwaves across the world, throwing the balance of the seas into complete chaos. The Straw Hats head toward Egghead, where they meet Vegapunk. Rob Lucci and CP0 soon follow to assassinate the scientist. Luffy's reunion with Lucci is memorable, as he completely dominates Lucci without immediately using Gear 5, forcing Lucci to earn the chance to even face that form. Eventually, Luffy unleashes it purely to humiliate Lucci, relentlessly bullying him. Soon after, Kizaru arrives on Egghead entirely unprepared. Luffy wastes no time striking first and toys with the Admiral, casually overwhelming him while treating the encounter almost like a game. At this stage, Luffy fights with complete freedom, his control over Haki flowing naturally without restraint. Realizing an Admiral alone is not enough to deal with a newly crowned Emperor, the 5 Elders intervene. Despite countless battles, Luffy stands tall when facing one of the 5 Elders. His years of training with Shanks give him the clarity to assess the situation properly, and instead of dragging the fight out, Luffy prioritizes rescuing Vegapunk and Bonnie. He entrusts them to his crew while he stays behind to hold the Elders back. The Giants arrive to support him, and Emeth's awakening in Luffy's presence proves crucial. No matter how much damage Luffy dishes out, the Elders seem largely unfazed, but in the end, Luffy and the Straw Hats successfully escape Egghead, rescuing both Vegapunk and Bonnie. Make sure to subscribe and smash the like button for more One Piece videos.